My name is Cheryl Seymour, and I am 56 years old. People like to talk about the moment their life fell apart as if it were some sudden violent collapse. Mine didn't collapse. It cracked slowly, quietly, until one day the entire thing split in half. For most of my adult life, I worked as a high school sports coach. Not glamorous, not particularly profitable, but I loved what I did. I loved watching stubborn kids turn into responsible young adults. I loved helping them believe in themselves more than anyone ever believed in me. But loving my job never protected me. Not from exhaustion, not from criticism, and definitely not from the slow erosion of my marriage. My husband at the time, Daniel, had spent years telling me I was not contributing enough, that my work wasn't real work, that I should consider something more serious. What he meant was something that made more money. We fought about it constantly, him accusing me, defending both of us tired. I used to come home with sore muscles and a sore throat from cheering kids on. He'd sigh while looking at the credit card bill. The distance between us wasn't sudden. It grew like mold, quiet, ugly, easy to ignore until it was everywhere. But none of that prepared me for the day everything shattered. It was 8 years ago when I found out Daniel had been having an affair with an old college girlfriend, a woman he had once told me he barely remembered, a woman whose name I only recognized because I'd seen it scribbled in the corner of a dusty photo in our attic. He hadn't barely remembered her. He'd kept her alive in his phone, his messages, his heart, and he'd kept me busy with guilt and arguments to make space for her. I found out by accident, no dramatic lipstick on a collar, no accidental text. Just a calendar notification he forgot to remove. Lunch with Melissa. Don't be late. I clicked it. My whole body went cold. It took me 5 minutes to confirm what my heart understood instantly. Their messages were all there, a year's worth. Jokes at my expense, excuses crafted together, plans made behind my back. They talked about me like I was an unwanted obligation. When I confronted Daniel, he didn't deny it. He didn't even look surprised. He just sighed, as if I were the inconvenience, as if my pain was predictable. The divorce was immediate. I didn't beg, I didn't negotiate, I didn't wait for closure. I walked out and filed the papers before the sun set. At the time, our 2 kids, Gavin and Hannah, were already adults living on their own. I thought that would make things easier. It didn't. It made things so much worse. They took Daniel's side almost instantly. At first, they tried to paint it as neutrality. Mom, maybe he was lonely, they said. He didn't feel appreciated. You've been stressed a lot. You work too much. Excuse after excuse, each one slicing deeper. I asked them one day, why are you fighting so hard to justify his betrayal? They didn't have an answer, or maybe they did, but couldn't say it. We argued, then argued more. Then the calls slowed. Then they stopped altogether. The worst pain wasn't the cheating. It was realizing my children genuinely believed Daniel deserved understanding, and I did not. When Daniel remarried, his affair partner, 2 months after the divorce, no shame, no hesitation, I thought the kids would at least reach out to check on me. They didn't. They attended the wedding. They posted photos. I wasn't even told. The loneliness after that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't quiet. It was loud, echoing with everything I'd lost. My family had become a story I used to be part of, a photograph where someone had carefully cut me out. I tried reaching out eventually, and they agreed to forgive me, but it was a word without weight, a formality. They weren't ready to truly let me back in, not even for birthdays, graduations, pregnancies. I watched milestones through social media posts like a distant stranger with no right to ask questions. And for years, I swallowed the hurt. I told myself it would get better, that they would come back when the anger faded. I had no idea that when they finally did come back, it wouldn't be because they missed me. It would be because they needed something. And I, stupid, hopeful, lonely, would still open the door. The years after the divorce reshaped me in ways I never expected. Loneliness has a strange habit of forcing you to rebuild piece by piece, habit by habit, until you barely recognize the person you used to be. For me, rebuilding meant throwing myself into work. Coaching was never just a job. It was the one place where I felt needed. But even that wasn't enough to survive on. High school sports coaches are often underpaid and overworked, and I was no exception. I remember nights where I'd sit alone on the bleachers after a late practice, the stadium lights buzzing overhead, calculating bills in my head. My muscles ached, but the silence ached more. Then one day, a fellow coach from another school, an old friend, offered a wild idea. What if we build our own place, he asked. A facility to train kids outside school. Something private. Something ours. It sounded ridiculous at first. Too big, too risky, too late in life. But risk was becoming easier for me. I had already lost everything that felt safe. Before long, there were three of us, three tired, determined coaches pooling savings, contacts, and faith. We built the training center brick by brick with cheap paint donated mats and impossible hours. We expected it to fail. It didn't. Somehow word spread. Parents started talking. Kids started showing up. We hired more trainers. We expanded programs. We ran ads and got traction. Suddenly, the place was thriving, popular, respected, profitable. For the first time in decades, I felt like my life belonged to me. And that was when my children finally reached out. It was subtle at first. A text from Gavin. "Hey, Mom. Long time. How are you?" Then one from Hannah. "Heard you're doing really well. Want to catch up?" I wanted to believe the best. I wanted to believe they'd finally realized that blood was thicker than betrayal. But there was something hollow in their words. Something too polite, too formal, like they were speaking not to their mother, but to a potential investor. Still, I answered. I told myself I had waited long enough to hear from them. I'd be a fool to slam the door now. When they finally came to see me, after 8 years, I recognized the smiles on their faces. They were the same ones Daniel used to wear right before asking for something expensive. We sat in my living room with small talk that felt too rehearsed. "How's work, Mom?" "You look great, Mom. The facility seems amazing." And then came the shift. Gavin leaned forward. "We were thinking, we'd love for you to spend more time with your grandkids." A pang hit my chest. I had never even met them. Not once. Not for a single birthday, holiday, or first step. Before I could process the offer, Hannah added lightly, "And well, things have been a little tight for us. We were wondering if you could help us out, just until we get back on our feet." There it was, the real reason. A request wrapped in sentiment tied with a bow made of guilt. I smiled politely. I nodded. I told them I would think about it. I even hugged them goodbye. The moment the door closed, the emptiness in my chest hardened into something sharper. They didn't come for me. They came for money. And the worst part, they knew I knew. After they drove away, I sat on the couch for a long time, staring at the quiet room. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from anger, but from the realization that I still wanted them, even if they didn't want me. But wanting them didn't mean surrendering again. So I did the only thing I could do to stop myself from falling back into that old role, the role of the parent who gives until there's nothing left. I blocked them. Everywhere. Every number, every account, every platform. Not out of revenge, out of survival. But even then, something inside me whispered, "This isn't over. They'll try again." Not because they miss you, because they're desperate. And I was right. Because mere days later, the truth came knocking loudly, messily, and with the kind of force that only comes from people who suddenly realize their safety net is gone. Blocking my children should have felt empowering. Instead, it felt like placing a bandage on a wound that was still bleeding underneath. For a few days, my house was painfully quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where you start pacing for no reason, boiling water you never drink, checking your phone even though you know no message will come through. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. It gnaws at you. It whispers. What are they really up to? Why did they come back now? And after 8 years of confusion and heartbreak, I finally let that curiosity win. So I called a few relatives, people I hadn't spoken to in years, people who had stayed in touch with my kids in ways I hadn't been allowed to. I expected scattered information, maybe a rumor or two. What I got was a fully assembled puzzle I never knew I was missing. And the truth hit me so hard I had to sit down. My kids had never taken Daniel's side because they believed he was right. They had taken his side because they were bought. Bought with security. Bought with jobs. Bought with promises from the very man my husband had cheated with his lover-turned-wife's new husband. Daniel's affair partner, the woman who replaced me, had married a man who owned a lucrative furniture company. And that man had taken Gavin and Hannah under his wing. Upper management positions. Good salaries. Benefits. A long-term stable future. All handed to my children the moment they accepted their father's new marriage and walked away from me. It wasn't emotional loyalty. It wasn't manipulation. It was convenience. Their new stepfather became the safe bet, and I was the risk. Learning all this left a taste in my mouth I'll never forget. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. But the story didn't end there. Apparently, that company, the one my children had so proudly tied their futures to, was crumbling. Sales had tanked. Deals fell through, bad management caught up, and Daniel's new wife, Marie, couldn't keep her mouth shut about any of it. She had been venting to anyone who so much as nodded in her direction. The entire extended family knew the company was dying. everyone except me. And that part didn't shock me. What shocked me was this. Their stepfather planned to sell the company at a moment that would leave Gavin and Hannah jobless and terrified. Of course they came back. Of course they were suddenly loving and warm. They weren't trying to rebuild a family. They were trying to rebuild a safety net. And I was supposed to be that net. The realization settled in a way that made me both nauseous and numb. Because the betrayal wasn't new, it was old. It had just been disguised. Still, nothing prepared me for what happened next. 2 days after I blocked them, they showed up at my house. Not knocking, not timid, banging. My heart dropped into my stomach when I opened the door and saw them standing there, red-faced and indignant, like I had wronged them. "Mom, open the door," Gavin demanded. "We need to talk." I stepped outside without inviting them in. "I'm not interested," I said coldly. "I know everything. I know why you're here. I know you're only reaching out because your stepfather is selling the company." Their expressions froze. For a moment, the truth hovered in the air like smoke. Then Hannah snapped. "That's not true. How could you even think that about us?" I stared at her, wondering if she believed her own words. "You abandoned me when the divorce happened," I replied quietly. "You chose comfort over loyalty, and now that comfort is gone." "You're being resentful," Gavin shot back. "You're punishing us for a choice we made years ago. We're here because we want things to be right." "No," I said. "You're here because you need money." The silence was immediate. Then Gavin's jaw tightened. Hannah's eyes burned. Their accusations came fast, messy, emotional. "You're cruel. You're letting gossip poison your mind. You don't even know what we've been through. You never tried to understand us. We want you back in our lives. This is your ego talking." Ego. That word lodged into my chest like a blade. Because ego was exactly what Daniel used to accuse me of having whenever I asked for respect. Their voices grew louder. My chest grew tighter. Finally, I said, "You don't get to lecture me about family when you erased me from yours for 8 years." It was the first time I'd spoken that truth aloud, and my voice cracked at the edges. They fell silent not because they understood, but because they were out of excuses. Without another word, I turned and closed the door. The lock clicked soft but final. Inside, I leaned against the wood and let my heart slow down. Their voices faded. Their footsteps retreated. But the heaviness stayed. That night, I barely slept. My mind spun with everything they'd said, every accusation, every desperate plea, every half-truth twisted into justification. And at the center of it all was a single fear. What if I was making the biggest mistake of my life? What if shutting them out now meant never being forgiven later? What if I lost my chance to know my grandchildren forever? But underneath that fear was something else, something steadier, something painful and honest. I don't want to be used again. Not by them, not by anyone. It was that truth, not anger, not pride, that carried me into what would become the hardest confrontation yet. A confrontation they forced into existence. Because the next time I saw them, they didn't come alone. They brought my grandchildren. Kids I had never met. Kids I had only seen in filtered photos. Kids they thought would soften me enough to open my wallet. They were wrong. The next time I saw Gavin and Hannah, I was in the middle of a youth conditioning session at the facility My Sanctuary, the one place where I felt grounded, respected, and unbroken. The gym echoed with the thud of sneakers against the floor, the sharp whistle of timing drills, and the scattered laughter of kids who trusted me far more than my own children did. Sweat, effort, discipline, this was my world. Which is why the receptionist's voice over the intercom immediately put a sour twist in my stomach. "Cheryl, your children are here. They're refusing to wait." For a moment I froze. Not because they were there, but because she didn't say their names. Just your children, a fact stated, not a relationship honored. No one at the facility even knew I had kids. I breathed in through my nose, held it, exhaled. "Tell them I'm in a session," I said. "They can wait." "They said they won't," she replied softly. "They're insisting." There it was, that entitlement, that boldness, that belief that they deserve special treatment even here, even now. I turned back to my group of students, forcing myself to finish the session. Every second felt heavy, like wading through syrup. My whistle cuts felt sharper than usual, my instructions more clipped. Finally, after 30 dragging minutes, I ended practice, handed out water bottles, and watched the kids run toward their parents in the lobby. That's when I saw them. Gavin, Hannah, and 3 small children, my grandchildren, standing between them, fidgeting, bored, unaware of the storm swirling around them. My heart clenched before I could stop it. 5 years. 5 years of birthdays, first steps, first words gone. Not because I didn't want to be there, but because their parents made sure I wouldn't be. I motioned to security and asked them to escort my children into my office. Not kindly, not gently, professionally, firmly. If they were going to force themselves into my life, the least I could do was control the terms. By the time I entered my office, they were seated, impatient, offended, and visibly annoyed. Hannah was the first to speak, her tone sharp. Mom, do you know how rude that was? Making us wait? Gavin added, We have the kids with us. You should have at least come immediately. I set my bag down calmly. Everyone waits for me when I'm coaching, I replied. You're not an exception. That's ridiculous, Hannah snapped. We're your family. Family. Family after everything. I let the words sink into the room like a stone sinking into water. You made your choices 8 years ago, I said. Family doesn't disappear until it needs something again. Their faces flushed with anger, but also guilt. Real or performed, I couldn't tell. Trying to pivot. Gavin forced a smile and gestured at the children. We brought the kids so you could finally meet them. Look, they're right here. I knelt down, meeting the children's eyes with a soft, instinctive smile I couldn't suppress. They were innocent. They were blameless. They were beautiful. And they were being used as leverage. I rose slowly. You brought them, I said, because you thought I wouldn't say no in front of them. That's not true, Hannah protested too quickly. You think I can't tell when someone is manipulating me? My voice sharpened. I was married to someone who perfected the skill. Their expressions darkened. The tension thickened. Finally, Gavin broke. We just want to fix things, Mom. Why are you making this so hard? We came here to talk about our future and what we had planned. There it is, I interrupted. The plan. His mouth snapped shut. My pulse hammered, but my voice stayed steady. Say it. Say what you came here for. Gavin exhaled sharply. We're starting a business. A new one. We need investors. And you thought of me, I said. You're doing well, Hannah said, her voice edging toward pleading. We thought we could finally connect as a family, and maybe you could help us not forever, just until we're stable. There it was, the truth, stripped bare. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with grief. The grief of realizing that love was not the currency here. Security was. I'm not interested, I said quietly. Hannah's voice cracked. We're asking as your children, and I'm answering as the mother you abandoned. The room fell silent, except for the restless shifting of tiny feet on the carpet. Then Gavin exploded. You're unbelievable, he shouted. You're letting your ego ruin everything. We're trying here. We're trying to include you. His voice boomed through the office. The youngest child flinched and burst into tears. The other two followed. Every instinct inside me activated. I moved to them, soothing them gently, rubbing their backs, whispering to them, not because of their parents, but because they deserved comfort. Meanwhile, Gavin and Hannah kept arguing loud, defensive, frantic, while I stood there holding the crying children like a shield against the noise. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Finally, I stood tall and turned to face them fully. If you don't leave right now, I said, I will have security escort all of you out. I am done with this conversation. Gavin froze, Hannah's face contorted with hurt. You're heartless, she whispered. You'll regret this. Your pride is going to destroy whatever's left. Maybe, I replied, but my self-respect will still be intact. I opened the door. They hesitated only a second before gathering the children and leaving anger clinging to their footsteps. When the door shut behind them, I finally let my breath shake. The room felt too small, too loud with echoes of their accusations, too heavy with everything I'd tried so hard not to feel. I didn't unblock them. I didn't call them. I went home and sat in the dark for hours. The image of my crying grandchildren burned into my mind. Not because of me, because of the chaos their parents brought with them. And even though I swore I was done, the truth was far more complicated. Because within 24 hours, I received an email, an apology, a confession, a plea. And for the first time in 8 long years, I didn't know what to do. For 3 days after the scene at my facility, the world felt strangely muted. No calls, no knocks, no familiar footsteps pounding on my front porch, just silence. But silence from someone who wants something is never real silence. It is only the breath they take before trying again. And on the 3rd afternoon, as I sat at my kitchen table staring into a mug of cold chamomile tea, I never drank. I heard the soft ding of an email notification, an address I didn't recognize. The subject line made my fingers go numb. From Gavin and Hannah. I opened it slowly, bracing myself for another round of blame, manipulation, and guilt. But what I read wasn't what I expected. Mom, we're sorry. The message was long, messy, but sincere, like it had been typed through trembling fingers. They admitted it. Every word of the truth I had clawed together piece by painful piece. They admitted the company was failing. They admitted they had depended on their stepfather for security. They admitted they had been offended when I accused them of choosing convenience over loyalty, offended because it was true. We didn't realize how selfish we were until you said it out loud. A part of me softened. Another part braced itself. This was still unfamiliar territory, an apology too big, too heavy to trust without caution. Then came the part that made my chest tighten. We know you have every right to shut us out, but please don't shut out the kids. I closed my eyes. The kids. The grandchildren I had only met through tears in my office. The little lives that had been kept from me because two adults couldn't face their own guilt. The next paragraph revealed everything. Their stepfather was selling the company no matter what they said. They were starting their own business not out of passion, but out of necessity. Their plan had always been to ask me to invest, but after the confrontation, they promised they wouldn't bring it up again. If you ever want to see the kids, just tell us. We'll come. Anytime. We owe you that much. At the bottom, we hope you give us another chance. Not for money, but because we finally understand what we threw away. I read the email 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I didn't know how to feel it. Was it real? Was it too late? Was trust even possible anymore? For days I didn't reply. I didn't decide. I didn't move forward. I just let myself breathe. Because forgiveness should never be rushed, and reopening a wound should never be impulsive. 2 months passed. During that time, they didn't send another email. They didn't show up. They didn't push. And strangely, their silence felt less like abandonment and more like respect. Maybe they finally understood the damage they'd done. Or maybe they feared losing their children's grandmother forever. Either way, the quiet gave me space to think. By the end of the 2nd month, I realized something painful and true. I might never fully trust my children again. But I didn't want to leave this world as a stranger to my grandchildren. I'm 58 now. I don't have decades to waste. And whatever little time I do have, I want to spend it creating something that was always meant to be mine. A connection with the little ones who never asked for any of this. So I opened my laptop, hands shaking slightly, and typed my reply. Let's have dinner. This weekend. All of you. But let me be clear, I am not investing in your business. I am not providing financial support. If that affects your willingness to come, then do not come. But the door is open for family, not for transactions. I expected a delayed response. I got one almost instantly. We'll be there. And we didn't expect anything else. They arrived on Saturday evening with their spouses and children. No tension, no demand, no scripts in their eyes, just caution, humility, and something I hadn't seen in them for nearly a decade, a desire to try. I cooked as if muscle memory had woken up from a long sleep. The kids ran through my living room. My grandchildren hugged my legs without understanding why I looked like I was about to cry. Their spouses apologized on behalf of the family. Gavin apologized. Hannah apologized. Not with excuses, not with pleading, just with truth. They told me they understood exactly how deeply they had hurt me. They told me they wanted to rebuild slowly, carefully, without asking for anything except time. And for the first time in many years, I believed them. Dinner felt like a memory I had missed, but somehow returned to. Warm lighting, soft laughter, tiny hands grabbing for dessert. A home that didn't feel hollow anymore. When the night ended and they packed up the kids, Gavin hugged me first. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, "for all of it." Then Hannah, her voice breaking. "We want you in our lives, for real this time." I nodded, not fully trusting, not fully healed, but finally open. Because healing is not an instant. It is a choice made again and again. And that night I chose to begin. As I closed the door behind them, the house didn't feel empty. It felt expectant. Like something broken had been placed gently on a table, ready to be glued back together, slowly, patiently, one piece at a time. And for the first time since my life cracked open 8 years ago, I didn't feel alone.